Riley, Wolves and Wagers, coming at you with our first top 25 NBA player power rankings. I'll kick it over to you, Ry, for a couple players who were left off this list, and then kind of jump into how we got to this ranking.
Yeah, we have LaMelo at 27, not shooting the best from the field, but his numbers are starting to creep up again. It's good to see him healthy and playing basketball again. He's good for the league. And then Zion at 26, he's only averaging like 21 points per game right now, and the Pelicans aren't winning the most games as of now. But he could easily, jump into the top 25 at any given time. So those are our two honorable mentions that I just missed. But we both came to an agreement on this list. Some of these players might be higher for one and lower for the other. But this is our consensus list that we came up with together. And we kind of factored in a bunch of different things like winning, how well your team's doing, your underlying number as far as analytics go, as well as just like straight up what you're averaging, right? That has to matter as well. But all those things kind of factor in, and this is our current power rankings for our top 25. So I'll let you start with our 25th best player.
Yeah, and that's going to be Jalen Brunson. I got him a little higher on my list, but when you look at these numbers, 23, 5, 3, 42% from the field, 46% from deep. He's come up clutch in the playoffs before. He's a top 25 player in this league, no doubt, right?
Yeah, he's the heartbeat of that Knicks team who's starting to play some better ball, even though they are hovering around that 500 spot right now. I'm going to the other JB for spot 24, Jaylen Brown, 23, 5, and 3. His numbers have taken a dip because of the acquisitions of guys like Jrue Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis, but because they're probably the team to beat in the NBA. I mean, maybe the Nuggets, but it's tough to leave a guy like Jaylen Brown off this list when he's still the second best player on the Celtics, even though his numbers have taken a dive. Another guy who's kind of settled into that number 2 role now is Kyrie Irving with Dallas. We have him at 23, 22.5, 4, and 6.5. Pretty good numbers for his usage rate as of now. The field goal percentage needs to go up a little bit. He's kind of struggling from the floor, but it's creeping its way back up there. And with how well the Mavs are playing, he's got to be in the top 25.
Yeah, and then jumping over Damian Lillard at 22, I know sounds really low, but I think we both agree that just based off of his shooting splits right now, but he's going to get out of this funk, and the Bucks are going to be a contender. But really want to dive into number 21 on this list, and that's Desmond Bane. I also have him a little bit higher currently, and that's just based off of just his numbers. And I know Memphis isn't really obviously the best team right now, but Desmond Bane has kept them above water, and hopefully he can continue to do what he needs to do. But he's 21 on our list in the consensus rankings, right?
Yeah, Lillard had a huge game yesterday, so that's going to help climb him back up. Like you said, his splits aren't the greatest, but we're not worried about him at all. Desmond Bane looking like a pretty good number 1 option without Ja Morant right now, even though they're not winning a ton of games. So I really like those two players. Number 20 is going to be Lauri Markkanen. Not the sexiest name just because the Jazz aren't very good, but he's a win share monster. He's an analytic monster, and he's averaging 24, 8.5, and 1.5. So the numbers don't pop off, but he's very efficient. He's knocking down pretty much every three-pointer he puts up, it seems. So we love a guy like Lauri Markkanen. And then we got De'Aaron Fox at 19. He's a player who would be higher probably if he played more games. He missed, that stretch, but he's back now, which is nice. But 34 and 6, I mean, that's no joke for numbers, even in a small sample size. So shout out to De'Aaron Fox. We love him. And then tacking in at number 18, his old friend Jimmy Butler. The Heat are on a nice little streak here where they're starting to find themselves back into winning some ball games. So I have to have him in the list. 26 and 3.5. He is not the highest Miami Heat on this list, though. His teammate is right above him.
Yeah, and I think Bam has to be above him right now. And look at his numbers, 23, 10.5, and 4 on 53% shooting. That's insane, and the big reason why the Heat are kind of still in it and high in our power rankings, right?
Yeah, I like Bam a lot. He was a piece that I really wish was heading to the Wolves when the Heat had talked about trading for Jimmy from the Wolves way back when. Bam was a name with Josh Richardson, and it just didn't get done. But it would have been nice to get a young Bam, a young. I think that was rookie Bam back then. Number 16, Donovan Mitchell. We're both not super high on this guy. If it was up to you, he might not even be on the list at all. To us, he's an empty calorie guy. 29, 5, and 5. I mean, the numbers pop out at you, and they look great. I just don't know how much winning he contributes to. And his play style reminds me a lot of like a Houston Harden, where can you really win it all or be ultra competitive with a guy who wants the ball as much as he does?
Yeah, I'm not going to touch on him a lot. I'll just say, I don't think there's a big difference between him and Desmond Bane right now. If you put Desmond on the Cavs, I still think they're winning games. But then we got kind of two of the elder statesmen making the top 15, still doing their thing in this league. At number 15, Paul George, 47% from the field and 39% from deep. I mean, his jumper looks like his jumper back in OKC when I think he finished third in MVP, right? If I'm not
Yep.
mistaken. So we got him at 15. And then also at 14 coming in is Anthony Davis. He dominated the other night. Obviously, him and a guy we're going to talk about here very shortly will be contenders in the West moving forward. But I'll jump over to maybe a pretty well-known name and let you dive into him.
Yeah, a lot of people aren't going to be happy with LeBron James being at 13. They probably want him in the top 10 still. But to me, winning really does matter. They're 500 right now. They're 6-6, and they're talking about how do we get Zach LaVine? We don't want to give up Reeves, whatnot. That would maybe help them. I don't know if that's the best thing for them. I guess you still got to get stops on the other side of the ball. But LeBron James is still doing LeBron James stuff even in year 21. He's at 24.5, 8.5, and 6, just filling up the box score every single night. So shout out to LeBron, but as of now, we got to have him and AD a bit lower just because of how the Lakers are playing. And there's a lot of ballers in this league. And when you look at the numbers going forward, there's a lot of guys that are averaging a lot more PRA than them.
Yeah, and I'll start with number 12, but the next three guys on this list, man, they're dogs. And number 12, who I have in the top 10, is Tyrese Maxey. And you might think, yeah, Tyrese Maxey, he's nice, but top 10 in the league? Like, what are you talking about, Dalton? But look at these numbers. 27.5 points, almost 7 assists, over 5 rebounds, 48% from the field as a guard, 43% from three. These are video game numbers, right? So obviously Philadelphia did lose to Boston. That was a heavyweight matchup. We still have Philadelphia as a top 3 team in the NBA right now. And a big reason is obviously a guy who's really high on this list. But I think Tyrese Maxey should get his flowers as well.
Yeah, I think the James Harden trade was the best thing that could have happened for them. You're letting Maxey kind of come into his own right. And maybe that's going to be, now I don't want to get ahead of myself and people take this out of proportion, but a little Kobe Shaq situation. You have an elite guard and you have an elite big man. And that's kind of what Philly's direction is. And then you fill in the pieces around them. So I'm a huge Tyrese Maxey fan. I agree he could be in the top 10. We have him slated at 12 right now, and that's pretty high for a guy like him coming, based off where he was probably at coming into this year. But he's been balling. Another guy that's been balling, same draft class, 2020, Tyrese Halliburton, 24.5, 4 boards, 12.5 assists. Pacers are starting to play good ball still. They have a winning record. They're not getting a ton of stops, but they're outscoring teams. They beat Philly the other night. Like, Halliburton could be a lot higher on other people's lists. He's second in the league in win shares, which kind of surprised me. But then at the same time, his game style plays towards why analytics would love him. But him slated at number 11, I think, is very respectful right now. But he could be top 10 going forward. And then at number 10 is the guard right in front of him is SGA, right? The Thunder going to be in that playoff mix. Maybe a hot take, maybe not. A lot of people do like Shea. 29, 7, and 6. I mean, when you're averaging almost 30 points a game, he averaged 30 last year, still putting up 7 boards, 6 assists, like ball dominant guy. I get it, but they're winning games now, and that's starting to translate.
Yeah, and I have SGA as a top 10 player as well. And I also have this guy as a consensus top 10 player. And when you actually look at his numbers, you're probably thinking, is this 7 years ago? It's not. Kevin Durant's played in 11 games this year, so we can't use he's sat out a ton of games he hasn't played. So that's a pretty large sample size for an NBA season, in my opinion. 30 points a night, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. You want to know shooting splits? Probably not, because it scares me. 51% from the field, 45.5% from deep. So if KD is continuing to be on the court and he's playing like this, he has to be a top 10 player. I don't even care if he's 44 years old, right?
Yeah, one of the greatest scorers this league has ever seen. Got a lot of love for KD. His acting skills could use a little work in that Thunderstruck movie. I watched that again recently, but outside of that, you put him on a basketball court and it's game over. Number 8 right now, probably not looking the greatest just because of his last 2 games, but we have Anthony Edwards at number 8. 26, 6, and 5. As of now, his numbers took a bit of a dip after his last 2 games, but the Wolves are still 8-3. He's the best player on the Wolves. They're playing good ball. They just broke their 7-game win streak by getting blown out to the Suns. But you got to have Ant up there as the number 1 option on a team that's 8-3.
Yeah, and he is the odd man out of my top 10 list, and that's no disrespect because the guys in front of him are Tyrese Maxey, SGA, Kevin Durant. And now we lead into number 7, who I have probably too high on my list because it was his first game back, but he looks absolutely unbelievable and unguardable. And that's Devin Booker. And he's going to be a problem in this league for not only this season, but for a lot of years to come. And Anthony Edwards is going to have to continue to kind of grow his game to be in consideration with D-Book. Obviously, the all NBAs, Anthony Edwards needs to get to that level to be in consideration. But I got Devin Booker a little higher, but we got him at 7 on this list, right?
Yeah, love D-Book's game. I mean, just a super efficient 3-level scorer, can beat you any way he wants. And he's turned into a semi-plus defender now too, which really helps his game. So shout out to Book. We love Book. At 6, I got Tatum, 28.5, 9-4 on Boston, arguably the team to beat in the NBA. Not too much to say about him. This dates back to last year. He's still a dog. His 3-point percentage is up this year, which has kind of been his only knock over the years. So now that he's improving that jumper a bit, it's getting pretty scary out there in Boston.
Yeah, and I got Tatum at 10 right now, but kind of the same thing with Ant. Look at the guys right in front of him. You're splitting hairs, and having him at 6, totally get it. Boston just went in and beat Philadelphia yesterday. And then we'll kind of lead to we just talked about Kevin Durant, his numbers. Let's talk a little bit about Steph's numbers, who we got at number 5. He's playing 11 games as well. I know he sat out against the Timberpuffs, and then Draymond didn't want to play, so he decided to choke out Rudy Gobert. But we'll stick to Steph Curry, the actual basketball player who's providing value on the court for his team. He's averaging 30 points himself. Obviously, only 4 rebounds and 4 assists, but shooting splits 48% from the field, 44.6% from deep. Unbelievable. So Steph, I think, is playing at a top 5 level right now.
And you have to have him in the top 5 because if you take him away from that Warrior team, I don't know how many wins they have. I could probably count them on one hand for sure. Like it's not a lot without Curry. They don't look great without him. You know, Clay, it's sad because it's looking like he's starting to get into that post-prime era. Maybe it was the injuries. Maybe it's just with the age coming on and whatnot. But he's got to step it up. They need to make a move out there or something to get some more scoring help for Curry. But moving on into the top 4 now, you got Giannis, 29.5, 9.5, 3.5. I mean, he's a box score monster. Analytics love him, super efficient. Playing on Milwaukee, who's going to be a really tough team to beat now that Dame's starting to play better. Dame had, I think, 37 yesterday. I don't know if I mentioned that yet. But that Bucks team is going to be scary. The East is going to be a gauntlet as far as the top end goes. So is the West as a whole is a gauntlet. But right now, I do have Giannis slated at 4.
Yeah, and I have no problems with that at all. He has to be in the top 4. And then number 3 on our list, but number 1 on my list for this season is no other than Luka. And it just comes down to not only his numbers, but if you tune into Mavs basketball, I know Kyrie is playing alongside of him, and we have Kyrie top 25 and deservingly so. And he has been a man for a long time on a lot of different teams. But Luka is the dog here. And you look at these numbers, 30.7 points, 8.1 assists, 7.8 rebounds on 50% shooting and 42% from deep. That's been my biggest knock on Luka's game. And he takes a lot of threes, but he hasn't been the most efficient. Now, when he gets cooking with those step backs, he's unguardable. But when he gets in his little spells, he can also go 3 for 11, which I think he did last night. But I still have Luka number 1. The Mavs are winning ball games. They dominated against the Pelicans. They dropped 130 points once again. So he is number 1 on my list. But once again, we are splitting hairs with these top 3 guys, right?
Yeah, and then, you got a guy like Joel Embiid, 32, 11.5, and 6, right? I mean, Philly's playing good ball. Won MVP last year, whether he deserved that or not, I'll leave it up to the committee. But you have to have Joel in the top 3 for sure, just because when you look at his numbers, you look at how they're playing, there's not much more to be said about that. A lot of respect for Embiid, even though I don't really like the style ball he plays where, I mean, you blow on him and he's hitting the deck, 300 pounds, just flopping onto the ground. Don't love that aspect of it, but I do have a lot of respect for his game. But number 1 for me and a lot of people, and I'll be willing to go as far as to say until he retires, he's probably going to be number 1 on my list. He is the system. He does everything. There is not a single flaw in his game. He shoots 60% from the floor. He doesn't take a ton of threes, but he shoots over 40% from deep. It's none other than the Joker, right? Won his championship last year. Maybe they're finals favorites again this year. For sure, top 3 for as far as finals favorites go. 30, 14, 8.5. I mean, That's unheard of. And this probably isn't even his best year statistically, right? Like he's averaged close to triple double. Maybe he has averaged a triple double, I think, one of his MVP years. But Nikola Jokic, he's to me 1A in another stratosphere compared to anybody else. I don't know how good the Nuggets are without him. Maybe they are. I mean, I like Jamal Murray. I like MPJ as far as role pieces go. But Nikola Jokic, win share monster, box score monster, everything about him. It's just hard for me not to have him at one.
Wolves and Wagers. Catch us next time.